Hi everyone, welcome to Making It in Games PAX panel. My name is Jess. I'm from the Academy of Interactive Entertainment. If you've never heard of us before, we are one of the first specialist educators in the world for teaching how to make games. Started here in Australia. We've got campuses in Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, Adelaide and online. And we've also made it over to the United States in Lafayette and Seattle. Today we've got a couple of our amazing alumni with us who have graduated over the last few years or so, who are going to be talking a bit about their journey from leaving AIE and making it in games and in the industry. We're also going to be talking about some tough questions like how to stay current in a forever evolving industry, and also maybe some tips and tricks and their thoughts on what makes a successful career in the game industry. So we're going to just hear from each of our lovely alumni. So Brody, I'll like to talk to you first as you take a sip of water. So Brody, hi. So Brody, when did you graduate from AIE and what course did you do?
So I studied the Advanced Diploma of Professional Game Development, specializing in games programming. I think that's the full name. I like that. I graduated in 2014, which is like 6 years ago, which is terrifying. It's been a while.
And what sparked your interest in studying at AIE and getting into this sort of industry?
I think it was mostly, it wasn't just playing games, because obviously a lot of people do that, and then that alone maybe doesn't spark the interest. It was a bit of that and a bit of playing with mods. And when I was young, experimenting with, I think it was Morrowind, one of the Elder Scrolls games. It had a really approachable modding toolkit or whatever. And I had no idea what I was doing, and I would just put the level pieces together and make, I don't know, dungeons and stuff. And that was fun. And then I would always open the script editor and just panic. I just couldn't do it because I was way too young, I think, to handle that. And then trying some mission making and modding and something like one of the Armor series. Again, scripting, didn't understand it. Some lovely person was like, I'll explain it to you. And it didn't really work because I was way too young for that too. But it was interesting. It was exciting. And I thought about, what if I could be one of those heroes who just turns up on a modding forum? It's just like this. It's easy. It's just a bit of code. What are you talking about? Just do it. And then I thought, actually, how about I just do that for a job instead? So that was sort of one of the ways, sort of the interest I had.
Wow. And when you say you were too young, how old were you? How old are we talking?
Oh man, the stuff with Morrowind would have been early teens, I think. So I honestly don't know. Whereas Armor was more like, actually, no, I think, some of that actually would have been primary school. So year 5, year 6, I'm thinking now of getting Armor maybe arriving in the mail after primary school one day and being excited. I think it was primary school or early high school, something like that. So early teens, that kind of thing. Pretty young. I mean, some people can do it, but I was just to self-teach it. It was just a lot. But it was interesting still.
And look at you now.
Yeah, look at me now, all grown up. Yeah.
I guess so. Since leaving AIE, what have you been working on? Where have you gone? What roles have you done? Any projects you can talk about that you've worked on? Let us know.
Sure. So yeah, a lot of the projects I guess I can't talk about, but in terms of the stuff that I've done and that sort of journey, after AIE, I went to a startup doing sort of architectural visualization and simulation, a place called Inge Realtime. And they were lovely. It was awesome. I spent a bit of time there. Eventually, that didn't pan out. The world of startups can be quite tough. They're still going strong. I always love hearing about what they do. But after leaving there, I ended up back at AIE. I was doing some assistant teaching work, and I ended up teaching first year at the Advanced Diploma. Which worked out pretty well because it was mostly fundamentals, and by that point, you know them, you understand them. So it was fun. After that, I ended up at Wargaming Sydney as an intern. I had some experience already, obviously from that startup and so on, but I kept failing the online test because it was hard, and I wasn't good at that kind of thing. And as an intern, the bar was low enough that I could slip in the door. It was great. And I worked there for 3 years, winding up as a senior engineer. And as of maybe a month ago, I think a month ago, no, maybe a little less, I'm now at Sledgehammer Games as a senior engineer. In terms of what I've done, all sorts of things all over the board. Some stuff I'm trying to think of what I can talk about. Some of the most exciting, I guess, because if I talk about all of them, we'll be here all day, but some of the most exciting stuff for me as an engineer has been like optimizing stuff. For example, if it's a workflow or something that we're using in a studio and it's taking a long time and everyone's getting annoyed by it, just getting in there and spending a bit of time making it faster, that's sort of really satisfying. Before it took this many minutes and now it takes a fraction of that sort of stuff. So a bunch of that over the career has been one of the prominent things, really exciting, one of my favorite areas to work on. In terms of other projects, and what you're seeing now, that was my final year project, AIE in second year, done in Unreal, just myself as a programmer and Eric Fear, someone else in the industry. He was the artist on that. This is one of the things we did. And super useful, it turns out, to have a cool looking final year project if you're trying to get into the industry. It's really helpful to be able to I milked this for years, just like, hey, here's a link. Can I work for you? And it was.
And here we are now. We're still milking it. Still milking it.
Yeah, well, still, you asked me for a video. I'm like, finally, I have one. It's the same one actually for years. You've probably already seen it. We've all seen it. Yeah. That's so. Those are some of the projects and some of the companies. I mean, there's another project which you'll probably see at some point of. It was a game mode for World of Tanks Mercenaries. Beautiful. A game mode for World of Tanks Mercenaries. Basically, that's the console version of World of Tanks. It was the Commander mode, which is like an RTS sort of style game mode. On something like that, I did a lot of, for example, vehicle pathfinding and driving AI, making sure that, when you have a bunch of vehicles and you say, go here, they don't all just run into each other. So that can be a bit of a difficult problem. We had a problem where you'd send them all along a narrow bridge and some of them would just drive right off the edges, all sorts of, it'd be frustrating as a player and having to dig into why that happens and solve it, which is a lot of fun. So those are some of the projects. There's a lot more, but, only so many I can talk about.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Thank you for that. And you were I guess a junior and now you've progressed to a senior position in how many years since leaving AIE? 6 years?
I think the real transition there was at Wargaming, which is intern to senior in maybe 3.5 years. It feels like a bit of a lie because I wasn't really an intern, but that's what I tell people because I like how it sounds. But yeah, so overall 6 years, I suppose, as a student, graduate, I should say, to senior.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that, Brody. I think Inge, we'll hear a little bit about your journey since AIE. So when did you graduate and what course did you do?
Okay, so I graduated in 2016, so it's 4 years ago, and I did the professional game development course as well, except I did the art and animation one rather than the programming one or the design one. Yeah,
awesome. And what sparked your interest in getting in this sort of area in game development, 3D art?
Yeah, my journey was a bit of a random one because after I finished high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to do something to do with art. So I went to art school and got an honors degree in ceramics, which is the most random thing that you can possibly choose. But I was making characters and environments and things out of clay and fabrics and stuff. And at the same time, I was studying philosophy and writing a paper on video games because I play them and I love them and the sort of immersive nature of video games. So it kind of, after kind of putting these two things together, I was like, well, I like to make sculptures and I like to talk about video games and stuff. So then I kind of realized that I needed to study more and get into video game development. So that's what took me to AIE next.
Cool. Yeah, definitely those skills, 3D modeling, I guess live modeling definitely transitions to those 3D sculpting sort of tools as well.
Yeah, it was amazing. I felt like I already had kind of a bit of practice in like ZBrush, except like IRL ZBrush.
Yeah. No VR technology here, just real life sculpting.
Yeah.
So since graduating 4 years ago, what have you been doing? What roles have you done? What projects have you worked on? And yeah, let us know.
Yeah. So I actually got a job while I was still studying at AIE, working at a company called S1T2. That was in my final year, where I was making a virtual reality game called Ket for the final year project. And excuse me, this was also being built with S1T2. It was kind of like an industry collaboration project sort of thing. So after I finished making that with them, I ended up getting hired by them full time and ended up working with them for like 3.5 years. And while I was working with them, I went from being a junior artist to kind of mid artist to then being the art director of the real time team over my time there. And since then, I have now left, and I've been a freelancer for a couple of months. Yeah, so that's kind of my journey so far.
Awesome. And some of the stuff at S1T2, it's not straight up like a lot of the times it's not video games. They work on a whole bunch of different sort of creative sort of fields. Are you able just to elaborate a little bit more on what they did at S1T2?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the really interesting thing about S1T2 is that we apply a lot of the same kind of fundamentals of video game development, but to training simulations and experiential things and like light sculptures and projection artworks, and a lot of it's still interactive as well. So it's kind of game development, but on using a lot of different hardware and software and things to make kind of immersive experiences that expand beyond the traditional game development kind of thing. What's up here now on the screen is a project that we made for, it's an educational program for children in the Pacific Islands to learn about healthy eating. And it was a cross-platform experience that was, it was an animation, a mobile game, a virtual reality experience, and an educational book that we took over there and put into schools, into their curriculum to teach them about healthy eating.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a really rewarding project because we actually got to analyze the data that came out of it as well and see that our project that we were making actually did make a change for a lot of those children and families.
Wow, that's so cool. Like all the stuff that you've learned from AIE and where you've then applied that in so many different areas, like still games, but yeah, helping different people and different experience as well, which is super awesome. Thank you so much, Inge. We'll move on. So we could talk here for hours. Sean, let's hear from you. Hello. So Sean, when did you graduate from AIE and what course did you do?
I graduated in 2013. I was a part of the first class in the United States to graduate, and just the very first in all of the United States, which was always a huge honor. And I went to just for game art.
Wow. Awesome. Wow, I didn't know that. That's awesome. And here you are today. Yeah. What sparked your interest in going to AIE as the first class in the US?
So it kind of comes from, I think, BioShock 2, when BioShock 2 came out, and I think 2009 or 2010. I remember watching a video about a guy who worked on some of the characters and just his whole process. And I just remember thinking, like, this is making video games. This is rad. I want to be a part of that. So I'm initially from Southern California. I moved up to Washington, got a job, started trying to look for a school, thought about DigiPen, didn't want to be in debt for 15, 20 years the rest of my life. I then at PAX saw the booth for AIE, and just the people there were really nice, and the fact that it was a startup school kind of had a soft spot in my heart. And I'm like, yeah, I like this a lot. This is rad, and this is affordable.
Wow.
So yeah, and I just really like, I don't know, AIE stuck with me.
No, that's such a lovely story. Thank you, Sean. And so you've graduated quite many years ago now. I can't,
A long time ago.
So,
Yeah, 7 years.
7 years. What have you been doing since then? Please explain.
So when I first got done with school, actually while I was still in school, I quit my job at an Apple store and started working as a teacher's assistant, teaching high school students how to use like Maya and Unity and stuff like that. And I liked teaching a lot, so I did that for my second year. And then the year after I graduated, I was still teaching while I was applying to studios, but I wasn't getting anything, so I just taught for a year. And then after that, I had heard about when you getting into testing is a way to get into video games. And my personal experience is that isn't the case. I know a lot of people think that. You think you get your foot in the door. My best advice is keep doing your practice. Keep making your art. Keep making your VFX. Keep making your environments, your characters. Just never give up. Never surrender. Just keep at it.
Yeah, awesome. And what are some of the projects? We've got some videos up here on screen. Can you tell us about some of the companies and the projects that you've worked on?
So currently what's on screen right now is the latest demo we released for Halo Infinite, a project that means a lot to me. I'm a huge Halo fan. When I was in school, my teacher worked on Halo 4 as an environment artist, and I remember thinking like, I would love to work on a Halo game, and 343 is just a great studio. And so then 6 years after I graduated, I managed to get into 343, and it's been not only the best job I've had, the most incredible, amazing, talented people. Like I can't stress this enough, how amazing the incredibly talented people that I work with. And some people that have been working in the industry for like 15, 20 years that are just gods in my opinion. Prior to that, I worked at a studio called Camouflage. I worked as an environment artist on Iron Man VR, which is a pretty cool experience, which is playing right now. Actually, what you're seeing right now, even though it's like super quick, I worked on a specific area called the Shanghai scene, and I made buildings and stuff like that. And that was a really good experience. This was an indie studio, or an indie studio. That was an awesome experience because they were just really nice people, and they heard what I had to say and they'd ask our opinions, and I got to demo and work with designers super directly, and it was an awesome experience. I highly recommend working for an indie studio, even though it can be stressful.
Wow, you've worked on some really amazing projects, and that Halo story is like, it's so cool that you, like, a teacher taught you that worked on Halo, and then now you've worked on Halo. It's like full circle, and you also done teaching as well. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I when I got the job at 343, I texted him and I'm like, so I'm working at 343. He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you deserve that. I'm like, oh, thank you. Yeah, it meant a lot to me. And then what's playing right now is the trailer for Forza. I was a vehicle artist. I specifically worked on the Bond cars. That was a really cool experience. I'm not a huge car person, but these games are like stunningly beautiful. So yeah, I got to work on this, and it was just a great experience.
I have heard that making 3D model cars can sometimes be tricky. How did you go with making cars?
It's so FYI, every car you see was touched by a lot of people. No one person worked on this, and I think that was actually a really neat experience because the other places I worked at after that, I owned everything that I've made. But in here, especially because the cars are the main character, you and many other people are touching it. And I thought that was a really neat experience. I can't go too much into what I did, but I worked with people from outsourcing studios sometimes, and people within the studio about working, because the car is made up of the outside and the inside. And then this is personal work.
Yeah, this is beautiful work. Did you want to maybe just explain a little bit more of some of your personal projects?
Yeah, so when I was working at Amazon as a 3D artist making furniture, woo! But I wanted to, on my own personal time, work on a scene in Unreal, and just Unreal is, in my opinion, the best engine that exists. It's just very artist friendly. It's very most artists tend to be very visual people too, so it's just really easy to use. I worked on this on my off time, and I just found concept art, which I recommend to any artist on your off time, push yourself, find a concept that you dig on ArtStation, ask the concept artist if they're okay if you make something, and then just hammer out a full scene. I've gotten a lot of compliments from people in the industry about my presentation for this and how I broke the scene down on my ArtStation. But also I got there by asking other people for help. I'm like, hey, what do you think about my breakdown? Some people gave me critiques, and I listen. I think one of the best things to do is ask for critiques and then listen and try to implement those critiques.
Awesome. That's some really good feedback for anyone out there looking to get into games and especially 3D art and art. Thank you so much for that, Sean. So I'm just going to kind of jump in and let's talk to everyone. How's everyone going?
Yay!
Doing good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that little bit of insight on your journey into games, into game development. Is anyone playing any games recently or doing much research over the last little while?
Probably more than I would like.
Yeah.
Any games that you want to announce that you've been playing?
Announce it like a press release.
I've been playing a lot of Hollow Knight, which I'm actually wearing a Hollow Knight shirt. I have a soft spot for 2D side-scrolling games, and that game is very hard and beautifully made.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of multiplayer games online, like party games and stuff, mainly like Fall Guys and Bomber Grounds and stuff. That's been just really cute, simple games that you can play a couple of sessions quickly, like in between like jobs and stuff, or like while having lunch, I can just jump in and play a game. I think that's a really interesting thing that's kind of come out of the times that we're in at the moment, is that people kind of want to all connect and have these kind of party moments together, which has been really fun.
I think I've gone the opposite direction, which is to go like really deep into stuff for hours and hours at a time, like really grand strategy, Stellaris, or really sort of hardcore medieval stuff, Kingdom Come Deliverance, just like disappearing for hours at a time, maybe as my own response to the situation of like, I don't want to connect, I just want to disappear. I'm gonna connect with people who aren't dealing with the situation. Maybe that's what's going on, but definitely the opposite of that.
Fair enough.
So you think during this time that we're in at the moment, it's kind of either, I guess, helped you to reconnect to games or have that extra time to be able to play games or even do research into any sort of game development tools or anything like that?
I'm not
I
sure
can
if
say as an artist. Sorry, go on, Brody.
I was just going to say, I don't. You could sort of go down that road, right, of playing a lot more games, but there's also other directions you could go, like, oh, I'm going to do more hobby stuff, or I'm going to, I don't know, work out more. Or so you could do that. I guess it can be useful. It's just having more time in general allows you to do things like that. But despite what I said before, I'm trying not to spend, like, oh, why even bother? Because you can't go anywhere anyway, and then disappear for 8 hours at a time. Like that's a dark road to go down.
Yeah. But I went through the exercise one as well now, but I found that it's been really good for personal projects, which has been awesome. I don't have travel time to work anymore or anything, so now I'm like, all of my extra time is just doing personal art projects, and it's actually started me doing Twitch streaming as well. So I've started since the whole like lockdown thing, I've started doing art Twitch streams and teaching like Unreal development and 3D art stuff, and doing like little kind of tutorial segments, which I probably wouldn't have done unless I was kind of, I don't know, trapped in a room. So it's been super positive. It's been good.
I try to keep pushing myself with learning new programs. I'm really trying to learn Houdini a lot more because Houdini, I think, is the future of 3D. And also like with the announcement of Unreal 5, I geeked out a lot over that trailer. So I like learning new programs as much as possible. And I've been trying to get into 3D printing for my D&D campaign of just making 3D models and then 3D printing them and stuff like that.
Me too. I'm making my D&D character at the moment. Yay.
Yeah, it's rad. I'm
Let's
a
not do
3D
this panel.
artist.
Let's
Wait,
just play D&D.
right? Like I'm a 3D artist. I can make stuff in 3D, and then 3D print it. That's rad. So
yeah,
super cool. Do you think it's super important to, like, you do your day-to-day jobs, you go to work? Do you think it's really important for like outside of work hours to be researching new tools, platforms, playing games? If they're, PlayStation 5's coming out, will you get that? Did you get VR? Do you think it's really important to, I guess, stay on top of these new tools and items, I guess?
Speaking
I
from
think it's really important.
I agree.
Sorry,
speaking from personal experience, I feel like less about the platforms and tools, speaking personally, but more just in general the idea of working on stuff. Researching generally, like how do I accomplish this mechanic in code, or how do I write this kind of system? How do I do this kind of thing? And just looking for excuses to go deep into stuff and research, find forums, find the right subreddits, find the right people on Twitter, wherever you can, and just soak as much information up. I'm often, or in the past, have jumped on various game design, game AI, programming, game dev, all these different subreddits, different places, and asked, how do I do this? I don't know how to. This doesn't make sense to me. And then someone who's done it is suddenly like, here's how you do it. Here's what I did. Here's some ideas. Here's what I would look into, and you can just learn so much, and it puts you ahead of everybody else. But whereas playing games, I don't necessarily think helps that much, particularly if you're going to be programming and at like the bigger scale. Because if you're deep down in the systems of like tools or whatever, like it doesn't really matter if you've played the latest games, I think.
Well, for me, I will, if I see a game that comes out and I'm like, I love that art style, I will buy it and I will go and sit in that game and I will go and look at that rock and analyze it. I might not even really play the game, but I buy games for the art stuff so that I can pick it apart and recreate it or whatever. But in terms of like doing personal projects and stuff, I find that I try to keep a good balance between like upskilling in tools and learning new programs and doing tutorials and stuff, but then also just like personal practice, like making sure that I really immerse myself in like a ZBrush sculpt or something, so that I'm keeping up with my anatomy practice, or I'm keeping up with my like whatever XYZ, doing trees or plants. So yeah, keeping that kind of balance. So I'm like not all about the technical program side, not all about the self practice, but trying to share it around.
I'm the same as you. Like when I see new games, I love playing them, and then like going through it. Like I hate being rushed in a game because I just want to stare and look at something, and then I love trying to then guess how these objects were made in game too, because different studios do things differently. And then I also think we a lot of the times learn from each other too. And I really like being able to be like, wow, how did they accomplish that? That is gorgeous. And just admire people in the industry in general.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I can definitely say that I've spent many hours walking along a wall in a game, just like trying to find the seam or something. Just like walking along there. So you find, it is super important to always, I guess, be keeping an eye out there for the next thing, or just always things that interest you as well, making sure that you're staying current, I guess. I guess my next question would be, I guess, like you've all been in the industry for quite a few years now, and you've all done a array of different things. What do you think has kind of changed throughout these, I guess, like 7 years 6 years and 4 years, I think it was. What kind of has there been any changes in the way that you work? I guess at work, if you can talk about it, and then at home, and what you've seen changed over this time.
Oh, I think for me the most exciting thing was texturing programs. Kind of when I first started, I was using like Photoshop, and then it kind of 3D coat a little bit, and using like Quixel a little bit, and then Substance came out, and like everyone kind of jumped on Substance, and that became like the big thing. So it's been really exciting for me from going like painting on flat UVs to using Substance and using like realistic textures and stuff has been probably the biggest thing for me over the past couple of years.
Yeah, same for me. I actually almost went the same route. Photoshop, ZBrush, and then I found Quixel, and Quixel seemed so rad because it plugged into Photoshop. And then my friend at Bungie was like, start using Substance, and I found Substance, and I'm like, oh, this is a game changer. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's so exciting. Yay.
Yeah. It's so rad. I love that program.
Me too.
On the non-art side over here, the group of people who can't play games and look at what code looks like, so it explains that answer. In terms of what's changed, speaking, I guess, again, broadly, not about any company in particular, but looking at the industry, I feel like there's definitely been more movement towards some of the bigger, not bigger, but the well-known engines like Unreal and Unity, be it for its artist friendliness or what have you. From an engineering point of view, that's really interesting because some people like myself may have gotten in the industry for the idea of being an engine programmer, and then people start going, oh no, we don't really need them anymore. Other people are going to do it for us, and that's the whole interesting sort of change. Not to say that you can't do it, it just means you need to work a little harder and really push for it. But that's probably one of the biggest changes. You'd hear about in-house engines, be an in-house engine programmer, learn C++, do all that, which I still think is awesome, and you should still do if that's something that interests you. But there's more of a shift towards, generally across the industry, Unreal, Unity. So that's been weird, and I guess kind of unexpected to how much that's happened. But times are changing, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah.
But not everywhere, I should say that.
Yeah. So that's super interesting. It's amazing how short of a time, like in the art world, how many programs you guys have been through. And do you, I don't know, there was like 4 or something that are the main ones that you changed through. Do you see some of them just like never going to be used again in the next like 5 or 10 years? Or do you see any of these programs being obsolete at some point?
I don't know if people still use Mudbox.
Do people still use 3D code?
Not really. I mean, I'm not sure. I
don't even know if that many people use ZBrush to texture. I mean, I'm sure some people do, but I feel like that's like more old school ways of doing it.
Yeah, for sure. I think a really interesting one is the 3D modeling software like Maya versus Blender. There are a lot of Blender users now, and I use Maya myself, but now I'm starting to see all of these incredible things that Blender can do, like rendering, and it's like particle effect stuff, and it's sculpting, but then also the poly modeling as well. So it's kind of this like one package program that is free as well. As a freelancer, I'm like, well, I might have to jump ship and go to Blender soon because Maya is heckin' expensive. So I think that's kind of interesting, is the new Blender tribe.
Well, I feel like Blender listens to its audience too. I'm a Maya user. I love Maya, but I feel like Blender is just going to be the wave of the future, in all honesty. And I'm going to the same. I want to start learning Blender because I have a lot of coworkers that are like, "Oh, you're using Maya? Nice, man." And I'm like, "Oh." And a lot of people use Blender. at multiple studios that I've been at. So I think I'm going to start teaching myself.
Yeah, me too. We have a very similar like storyline.
Yeah. Artists, yay.
Hey, artists.
Yeah, I don't use Maya much at all. It's crazy. Yeah. Or Blender.
You speak a language that I just don't understand, but I respect a lot.
In terms of, I guess, stuff that's obsoleting in sort of my area, there's not really anything I can speak to specifically, but I guess more addressing the idea that something is becoming obsolete when I don't think it is, which kind of contradicts what I just said about engines, but there is often a public opinion of like, there's no point learning low-level stuff and like low-level, fast, efficient, don't need that anymore. The engines will take care of it. But I think that's a very surface-level view. So this is the opposite of your question. What's not becoming obsolete that people think is becoming obsolete is that kind of low-level, C++ engine type skill. It sounds like it is, but it's not, because even if you go somewhere that's using one of the big engines, if you're doing that and you're shipping a AAA game, you're going to probably tear the crap out of that engine and do all sorts of stuff to it and change it, and that's where you need engine programmers. So don't be afraid if you're interested in engine programming out there. You still got it. It's going to be fine.
Good to know. I'll tell my friends.
Tell everyone.
Go tell everyone. So with like the changing of programs and platforms and all these different tools, how do you build on your skill set? Like you did talk on it briefly, all of you, saying you're always just looking at the next thing, tinkering around with different projects, so you're always upskilling. How does your work give you any extra time, if you're allowed to talk about it, to build on these skills, or it's just more on yourself and what you've heard through the grapevine of this is the next program or platform? Do you get extra time at work to do these things, or it's just something that you like to do just on your own from what you've heard around?
I'm a little bit of a workaholic in the sense that I get super lost in what I'm doing. So not as much at work, though when I first started quite some time ago, I was able to, something called hack time. But now it's, I like looking at certain sites like Level 7 and just seeing what people are putting out. And that's actually very time consuming. And just ArtStation, getting lost in ArtStation. That's like a void of awe of everyone. So that's how I look at a lot of stuff that people are putting out.
I was pretty lucky when I was at S1T2 that we had a lot of small turnaround projects. So it was really good for kind of upskilling in random little things that we wanted to try out. We could kind of cater our projects around wanting to learn different skills and things. Like we had a virtual reality thing and we wanted to try some NVIDIA smoke or something. We were able to incorporate that into the project, so we were able to learn some interesting new skills. So that was incredible at S1T2. But I'm also now newly freelancing because it is giving me more time to be able to do my personal projects, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. So kind of working part-time on random jobs that are actually quite similar to the things that I was doing at S1T2, a lot of virtual reality stuff, but then also I'm able to now choose the days that I want to be able to work on my own upskilling and stuff, which is very lovely.
For me, most of that kind of crazy working on stuff on my own time was really as a student and sort of early days in the career, in the industry, I should say. So like at AIE, we were doing 2.5 days a week. I would come in the other days and just sit at the back of a classroom and keep working. The campus would be open until 9 or 10 p.m. 3 nights a week. I'd be there those 3 nights, staying back, just grinding on anything I could, any assignment I would pick. Like, oh, we've got to do this. Okay, how about if we add a whole scene graph system? How about we add this stuff? How about we add this stuff? I want to do all these crazy things that I've heard of, and I'll just go and deeply, sort of research, look into. So it's that kind of thing, I guess, that really helps. These days, it's really a time thing. Like how much time do you want to put into this versus that? And I'm sort of trying to get a bit more work-life balance. But definitely in the past, I'd spent a lot of time outside of work still doing stuff, and you sort of start to feel guilty if you don't, and that's kind of a dark road too. So you've got to be a little careful. And try to balance it. I try to balance a little bit more because it's scary, especially as a freelancer who can pick their own time. You're just gonna, it's a slippery slope. I don't envy
Living your
you
best life, Inge.
You have to be a little bit careful, I find, working full time and then trying to do it all, because you can actually really burn yourself out and damage that drive to be able to do personal projects after work and stuff. So yeah, burnout's a thing that exists.
Yeah, and also
I think it's really important. I think it's really important to take care of yourself and separate yourself at times too. I know there's been some articles in the past few years coming out about unbelievable crunch at some studios, and I feel like actually the industry is going in a much healthier route where they're like, take care of yourself. And I think I'm really happy to see that happening.
Me too.
That's a really good kind of segue there for a question that I had kind of lined up is, what are some challenges that you can see like the industry facing? Hopefully we are moving into a better work-life balance, but it has been quite challenging in the past. Is there any other sort of challenges that you can see the industry or your company or as a freelancer in terms of the different platforms, programs, the diversity, in-app purchases, free-to-play games? Any of those things kind of spring to mind? Crickets. Might be a bit of a harder question to answer there. But do you see, I guess, the making games for, I guess, VR and then mobile games, do you think there's any sort of challenges we face moving into this sort of direction using these different platforms and devices?
I think, especially working at a VR studio, I think it's cool. I'm personally wearing glasses and having a VR set on my head hurt and was uncomfortable. But I think there's a place for it, but I think it has a long way to go. I think games like Half-Life Alyx are an example of VR really finding its niche. It needs to be more, not so expensive too. And people needing space to have VR wherever they live as well. And I see certain niches like that in games where I'm like, will that last? Won't that? Especially as a 3D artist, the limitations of VR. Like a lot of times for us, we want to go higher poly, more detail, and VR is limiting in that, and that's tough. So.
Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking in VR, making a beautiful scene and then having to cut everything back. The optimization pass is a bit heartbreaking.
Little soul crushing.
Yeah, it really is.
So the accessibility for a lot of these different new platforms coming out, and then also all these different gaming devices, and the accessibility for the wider community to be able to make sure it's sustainable for all these game studios, that's probably a challenge that we're facing moving forward.
Yeah.
Hopefully
personally, as an artist who wants to primarily work on games, I find that just being able to break through and make your passion project or make your indie title or start that ball rolling, I think is really difficult, because a lot of the money in this kind of industry you'll get from working in enterprise kinds of things, enterprise kind of projects, because that's just where the money is. So being able to break through from that side of work into being able to, have the dream job or make the dream indie game or whatever, it can be difficult as well.
Okay. We are running out of time. I guess we could talk all day. Got a couple more questions though. What would you say is the success for working in the games industry and making it through, I guess, many years? What's the success for a long career in the game industry or in this sort of industry?
You'll have battle scars to show, and that is rad. And you know that you went through that process. I'd say one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is the people. We're nerds. We like video games. and you can make references and people are like, I know what that's from. And that alone is incredible. And learning from other people, I've made some of the most best friends in the game industry and people who've supported me and been my cheerleader and just really cool, good people.
Inge?
Question.
Maybe, or Brody, any sort of like tips or tricks or thoughts to allow you to get through working in this sort of industry, in the entertainment industry and in any games?
I guess the answer to that is similar to the answer to the question you just asked, which I was thinking about, is kind of the thing that helped me the most was networking. Like that's the one of the most important things. It's an industry with a lot of people who are interested in it, and there are only so many jobs, as is often the case. I guess there are a lot of industries, especially ones that sound cool. One of the things that will help you the most is just to know people, and it's not like the sort of rich, sleazy sounding, like always at parties, chatting to people, or whatever, like making, friends with, rubbing shoulders with people in suits. Like that's not what I mean, but just talking to people, putting yourself out there. That made sense, right? That was an analogy. Sure, we all relate to that.
Oh, totally.
Putting yourself out there. Yeah, it happens all the time. Putting yourself out there, and a lot of the jobs I've had have been like referrals. And then if someone has a bad experience with someone years later, it's like, hey, do you know this person? Would you work with them? And then you like have this moment where you're like, I could totally stop this person in their tracks joining this job because of what they've done. And often, I prefer not to because we all have bad days, but like you could be in that situation in the future. You could do, if you're a bit of an ass or whatever, and that could come back to bite you. So making those connections, it's a small industry, that reputation, that sort of thing, pretty important.
Yeah, I
Don't
think
be an
also
ass.
not being scared to kind of forge the life that you want and the career that you want as well. Kind of looking at your whole experience holistically and kind of making sure that you construct what you want out of that. Because if you get the job that you want, you can always talk to them about, I want to have this time to be able to work on this stuff. Like if I'm working with you guys, then, on Friday afternoons, I do upskilling or something. Like there's always room to negotiate the life that you want. You are an individual. You are making your own way in the world. You don't completely have to sacrifice your entire being to work on the dream job. You're able to negotiate and forge your own kind of space there. So I think that's been a really useful thing for me, is actually just realizing that I do have a voice to be able to have the experience that I want to have. And I think that a lot of that is like self-care is involved with that as well. Just making sure you do have that time to be able to exercise and eat healthily and not let the job consume you, because if you let it, it can.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really, really good answer there, Inge. Thank you. I guess like moving on, like telling people what the answer is to a successful long career. Kind of maybe looking back to when you were at AIE, what would be something that you would, some advice that you would give yourself when you were little baby Inge and Brody and Sean? What advice would you give yourself, thinking like being in the industry for quite a few years now? What would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself that you don't have to wait for people to tell you how to do something or tell you what needs to be done next. You can figure all that out, all that stuff yourself. You can, like, all of the tools and programs and everything is at your fingertips already. Just like Google it, do tutorials, jump in, download a thing, give it a go, make a game. Just like do it. Just, I have a spare day. How about I learn how to make a game from start to finish, like little personal game jam project. There's you don't have to wait around for the right opportunity to do it. You can actually just start like right now. Stop watching this thing and start now.
Don't stop watching this thing. Don't wait till it's finished.
Multitask.
Don't have any great advice for myself because it kind of worked out.
Brody, I was waiting. I was holding out for your answer.
Doing whatever you're doing. We got here. There's not really great. Just keep working really hard all the time and keep grinding on that and try and get better. That's
never stop
as
learning.
per previous.
I'd tell
Sean,
younger
you wanna
me,
add to it?
I'd tell younger me, keep at it, don't stop. Because I know we've probably all had that moment where something isn't clicking, or you've sent out X amount of resumes and haven't heard anything, which is going to happen to everyone. Don't stop, because a lot of people that I've known do, and that breaks my heart when I see that. You just need to keep like, as an artist, keep making stuff. Concept art, make it, render it, boom, lighting, pretty, okay, put it on your portfolio. You'll keep improving. That old stuff you made 6 months ago, maybe not the best. You've improved a lot in 6 months. Just don't stop. And, some stuff will be good, some stuff will suck. It happens.
I think also not being afraid to reach out to people that you admire or that you want to learn from, I think is really useful. I've just randomly messaged some people that I really look up to, and they actually, they're just people as well, and a lot of the time they will give you the time of day. They will tell you what they think about an artwork that you've done or something that, a lot of these people that you're kind of idolize or something, they're there to also help as well. So I think just being able to reach out and join different communities, not being afraid to post your work somewhere and get the feedback that that could really help you out. Just kind of taking those social leaps.
Cool. And if you can remember it, going back to when you were leaving AIE and getting your first industry job, what was the transition like? Because I know at AIE we try to have a studio simulated environment, and you are working the full hour days. Did that help with your transition into working full time? And how was that transition for you all?
Super smooth.
Cool. That's what we like.
It's not a problem. Thanks, AIE. I was studying one day, and then I was at a place doing similar things, but for someone for money the next day. It was pretty smooth.
Yeah, mine was similar, but even smoother, because mine just merged into it, because I was had the AIE and then the job at the same time that overlapped, and then I just went into the job. So yeah, it's incredible.
I had an interesting experience where I wasn't as fazed by it when I first started at a few studios. I'm like, oh, I'm finally doing this. I'm really grateful. It was when I started at 343 that because at the studio they have a museum and they have cool stuff everywhere, and they give us really awesome gear.
Oh, cool.
It's a helmet one of the Marines from the game series, and I've been there almost 2 years, and I am still in awe that I work at 343 Industries, and I'd walk through the studio and just be like, there's cool stuff everywhere, and it took me a long time to not have imposter syndrome being there, but that happened after a few game studios.
Cool. Awesome. We are about to run out of time, but just really quickly, I'm going to combine kind of two questions at once. Can you give us your favorite highlight or experience working in the game industry, and where do you see yourself in maybe 10 years' time or so? Brody, start with you.
Sure. So probably my favorite experience was something that I sort of touched on at the very beginning. There are multiple experiences. They're all sort of similar, these highlights, where we had a very specific problem. It was very measurable. There's a process that's taking too much time, and I made my entire being about this one problem. I was so involved. I would dream about it. I would think about the problem in the shower. I would wake up in the middle of the night with solutions. It was just 100% oriented around this problem. And it was a really interesting time, because I think that's the human brain at its pinnacle of focusing the entirety of your brain power on one specific problem, becoming an expert, and no one else kind of understanding. It's a really crazy experience. And then coming out of that and saying like, this thing is now, X times faster and 10 times faster or something, pulling that number out of my behind, but just some factor like that, and just knowing I did this and it was me and it was this crazy experience going deep on this problem and I solved this and now people benefit from it. And it's measurable, so you can see before and after. This is the mark I left on the world, is this one little process faster. It feels great. That was probably one of my absolute favorites in the industry.
Awesome. And where do you see yourself in, I guess, 10 years or so?
Hopefully doing that all the time. That would be sweet. I don't know, honestly. It just depends on how, the Australian game industry is growing. With some bigger players, Wargaming Sydney and Sledgehammer Games in Melbourne now. Who knows where the industry could be in 10 years, but hopefully still doing crazy low level, sort of AAA game stuff, engine stuff, etc. That would be a lot of fun. So more of that, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, we'll look out for you and see what you've been up to in 10 years.
We'll do this again in 10 years.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll set it up now. Put it in your calendar. Inge, what has been one of your best experiences, and where do you see yourself in 10 years or so?
One of my best experiences, I think, like, holistically, is just the people that I've met and the teams that I've worked with. That's just the most incredible feeling, is connecting with people and working with people and making it together. But specific things is like the launch of a game that you've made, and then having that kind of sigh afterwards and seeing people play it and seeing people enjoy it, getting the feedback and stuff is just an incredible feeling. Yeah, that's probably
And 10 years from now?
10 years from now, I would like to either be working at I see like myself in indie studios, probably more than AAA games. I'd love to be working at, or art director of, or have my own indie studio working on games. So that's kind of where I see myself in 10 years.
Awesome. You got 10 years, better get going. And Sean, best experience?
Best experience is working with multiple people, seeing them problem solve, and just collaborating and walking over and just talking about the process. Specifically for me, I worked on an object environment piece that had animation in it, and that the animation would trigger, and trying to solve this and communicating with people and having people be like, dude, that's rad. I'm like, it's just nice to hear that, because you put so much blood, sweat, and tears into something, and then to hear someone who doesn't have to say something nice to you say that, you're like, oh, thank you.
That's
Like,
awesome.
experiences were about people you worked with. I'm over here going, and I did stuff, and it was great. And also the people, they were good too.
People are good too.
They go all right.
People too. Yeah, good.
And Sean, 10 years from now?
Ideally, I do have a dream studio. I know some people do that, some people don't. I really want to work at Bungie. That's my dream studio. I'm a huge Destiny fan, and I have some really good friends that work there. But if not that, then I just want to be able to make 3D environment art or just 3D props or anything at any studio that is just awesome and has a good studio life and makes badass stuff.
Awesome. That's what we want to do, is make some badass stuff, don't we? Awesome. So we have run out of time, but this has been a really amazing chat, and hopefully you guys out there have found out some extra information about the industry and how you can get into the industry as well, and some tips and tricks there. So thank you so much for our amazing alumni for joining us today, and we'll touch back in 10 years or so and see what you're doing.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. It was nice chatting.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.